The Elements of Friendship, Book 1, Harmony, by Amorous Fegaland. Chapter 16. A dear, dear friend is a friend in need. What in the world? Breathed Fuzzhead, eyes focused on the glowing green shards on the forest floor. This is one of the elements of harmony, Mr. Fuzzhead, Twilight explained, stunned by the same thing as the stag. We need all 6 to defeat Nightmare Moon and free Queen Celestia and her fellow Queen Regent. This is the 4th one we've activated, but we... A neuron fired in Twilight's mind, and the message it sent broadcast about her brain, like a spark igniting a fire. Her eyes widened in realization, and her sharp gasp, following such a quiet musing, brought the eyes of her companions over to her. What is it, Mom? Spike asked. I've been so stupid, Spike, Twilight replied, albeit with a smile. I've really been overlooking something very vital to the elements of harmony, that they are literally powered by the magic of friendship. That's how each of the elements have been activating so far, but I didn't think about it. Every time that an element regained its magic occurred exactly at the moment when I made a realization with each of you. What realization was that, Twilight? Asked Fluttershy. Twilight pointed a hoof at the shards of Fluttershy's element. It was when I realized just how much you valued the element that you carried the strongest affinity for. Not at a fully conscious level, I don't think. But myself and each of you realized how important that element was to you. As fascinating a topic of conversation that this is, interjected Fuzzhead, I think it may be best if we all of us return to Hind, our village of deer deep in the forest. We'll be safer there than at the edge that is surely still prowled by that eldritch pony without head. I think the Fuzzeyes got the right idea there, Twi, Applejack added. I think we ought to settle somewhere before we start talking our muzzles off. In a short time, a unanimous agreement was reached to follow Fuzzhead the Stag to the deer village of Hind. As Twilight explained, it would be easier to discuss what revelations had came to her if they were all in a place of comfort, rather than standing around in some frosty corner. But, Rainbow Dash cut in, would it be just as cold there as here? I mean, it's like super chill feel here, and this Hind place sure sounds like it's way in the forest. It's not going to be any warmer in there. Fuzzhead's antlers wavered with a subtle light. We deer possess a magic all to ourselves, as I'm sure you ponies do. Our old stag wizards have devised an abjuration that forestalls the eternal night of the dark mare. It has kept our village relatively temperate thus far, though, admittedly, the area of effect has shrunk somewhat since it was cast a month ago. Twilight cast a glance at the helioscentric sun floating at her head's level. Mr. Fuzzhead, do you think that you and your fellow deer could use this sun here? It would help combat the encroaching cold, and your village would have a source of light to look to. Fuzzhead cocked his head back to the sun, which Twilight had generated. I do not think the elders will accept what they see as a display of pity, but the masses of Hind should persuade them. It would be a great boon to our village. I thank you in advance. Twilight bowed her head. Don't thank us just yet. Nightmare Moon sits on the throne of Canterlot still. Her Alicorn simmered pink, and the heliocentric sun followed suit, hovering close by Twilight's side. Spike squinted at it from his place near Rarity. Sure is a bright ball of something or other. It's an orb of aether simulant kept in a quasi-plasmatic state, so as to create an artificial environment closely replicating that of daytime, Twilight explained to her little Drake. But it's not irradiating like a true aether, so we have no fear of tumors and cancer. Feeling the atmosphere taking an awkwardly grim turn, Twilight sheepishly grinned. But hey, even a ball of aether this big would incinerate us all. The sun is a gigantic spear of plasmic ether constantly erupting in subatomic fission. In an instant, Twilight realized what she was saying, and her jaw dropped. And Queen Celestia is trapped inside of it? Every face in eyeshot grimaced in horror, even Pinkie Pie's. Like her above, Applejack gasped. Could Celestia even survive in the heart of the sun? Of course! Twilight said vehemently. She told me that she wants to send it into the fire of Tartarus itself without even sensing her coat, but... She looked up at the tree canopy overhead. It can't possibly be pleasant, as she's been sealed in there for the better part of a month and a half by now. Let's get a move on, everyone! With nods and utterances of assent, the band made their way deeper into the forest, with Fuzzhead leading the way. It would do better to let Hardhind's representative lead their way to the village, so as to present a better image to the locals. It unsettled Twilight to be trotting through a forest so far from where she called home, even if it was with those whom she now loved as much as any pony else in her life. The pink-tinted light of her dwemer shimmer held helios-scented sun cast dark shadows against the surrounding trees, revealing the canopy of snow supported by the interlocking branches overhead. The heat of the helios-scented sun at such close proximity was so great that it felt warmer by far than any day that year leading up to the aborted Sun and Summer Sun celebration. The sweat was much appreciated, though, to the greater part of the band. Good heat had been denied them sharply upon their return from Ponyville. The icy droplets of freshly melted snow from overhead seeped into the Minotaur cloaks they bore, making for a bitter reminder of what they had escaped from, and what they had soon to face once more. If it were not for Fuzzhead, it was entirely likely that Twilight and her band would have lost their way. The trees were indistinct to the ponies who had largely grown up in more constructed and airy societies, and a feeling of mild claustrophobia set in. The air of the forest was beginning to feel close and oppressive, the last light of the moon and stars now far behind them.
Woo!
Pinkie Pie shouted suddenly and brightly.
I don't know if it's you, but it feels like we passed through a giant field of warmness that's making us feel entirely more at home than we have since Equestria. Either that, or the giant maw of an oversized dragon's ahead of us hidden behind all those trees.
Twilight reckoned more strongly than it was the former, meaning that they had passed within the field surrounding Hardhind that Fuzzhead had mentioned. If that was the case, they would soon see...
Wow.
Starlight and moonlight shone through the tree branches overhead, which were no more impeded by the snow. The gaps between the trees had expanded greatly, as they met an incline down into what was surely a very shallow bowl of earth and grass. Hardhind was a small village indeed, probably fewer than 5 dozen deer, but it still prospered. Cottages made out of twigs and branches bound tightly together surrounded each tree. Some of them stacked on top of one another and connected to the forest floor by walkways carved into the trunks of fallen trees. Each house bore within it a flickering orange light, bringing to mind the misery that the eternal night had brought to everyone, pony or not. In the dark, deeper into Hardhind, the shapes of at least a dozen deer could be seen. Stag, doe, and fawn. Even by the dim light of the bonfire in the village center, and the faint glow of the helios-scented sun entering their world, it was evident that these deer were arrow-fed, judging by the frail builds of the few fawns out and about. A burly stag with dark fur and a single antler, flanking velvet at the top of his head, turned in the band's direction. Fuzzhead was large, but he only met the deer's withers. He fixed a surly look on Fuzzhead, who merely bowed his head low at the approaching stag.
"You have returned early, Fuzzhead,"
the stag rumbled.
"and you come with ponies and the
He blinked at Twilight's helios-scented sun.
and the sun? How far did you venture?"
Only to the forest's edge, Cobanet, came the reply. These Quart and 3 were pursued by the pony without head.
Cubnut's eyes widened in shock. "You can't be serious. The pony without head is an old doe's tale, to frighten fawns into knowing not to poke their noses into the trouble of others."
We thought the same once of the dark mare, retorted Fuzzhead, and now she sits on the throne of the pony queen of light.
"Even so, the pony without head cannot exist. Something without a head cannot be alive."
"Life's what I thought too," cut in Applejack, "but I saw it with my own eyes."
"You are outsiders," snapped Cumnut. "Your word means nothing here."
"Oh yeah!" growled Rainbow Dash, bolting up to the surly stag's face and butting her muzzle against his. "Well, these outsiders actually have a pretty good idea of what's going on outside, and we can tell you dear people that the headless horse is really real and was chasing us forever!" Cumnut reeled back for the cerulean Pegasus, and see her flatten it.
You are a bold one,
He rumbled in a low voice.
and yet I see no lie in your eyes. Despite your confrontational demeanor, I will take you at your word.
Rainbow Dash smirked at her band. See? It just took a little bit of daring do. She winced, and, with eye wide, did a quick verbal reversal. I mean, daring do! Daring do is what I said! I didn't say about daring do! Twilight sighed heavily. Rainbow Dash, you don't need to play the book bronco here in Hind. No deer's going to judge you. Rainbow Dash rubbed the back of her head nervously. I know, it's just that, I mean, daring do's cool and all. Cool as Pegasus and all of Equestria. Apart from me, of course. But I don't know if any deer here thinks the same.
Mama, what's a bunch of pony doing, hind?
Asked the chestnut-colored fawn, stepping up cautiously behind Cobalt, with his dull mother behind him. It's a bunch of ponies, sweetheart, the doe corrected, and I don't know either. The band of ponies, and a drake, were attracting a good deal of attention for the hind deer because of Rainbow Dash's outburst. For most of the band, which spent most of their lives in the humble hamlet of Ponyville, this was their first time seeing such large groups of deer. Contrary to the broad color schemes of ponies, the deer were almost monochromatic by comparison. Varying shades of brown and some white were all that could really be seen. At the back of the group stood a cadre of 5 aged and gray deer, 3 does and 2 stags. Their eyes spoke of deep wisdom and old memories. The looks of the bulk of the hind deer gave the fuzzhead, fit in with the noses of him being aloof. Clearly, they did not take kindly to his return, though some did cast curious glances at his splint. Still, more eyes were turned toward the heliosensing sun, gazing at it in a vaguely mesmerized sense. Cumnut, asked the doe, who had previously spoken, who are these ponies in our village? Twilight cleared her throat. Ahem! Mr. Cumnut, do I have your permission to speak? The towering stag looked down at the lavender unicorn with hazel eyes, before inclining his single-horned head in assent. Thank you, sir, she said with a courteous smile, and a bow of her own head, before turning to address the crowd of deer. Kind dear folk of Hind, I am Twilight Sparkle, protege to Queen Celestia, Queen of the Light, and these are my companions for the distant town of Ponyville. This is Applesack of the Apple family. These are Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy. This is Rarity Bell, and this is Piggy Pie of the Pie Rock Inheritance. As he spoke, she indicated each mare in her rear, and each replied to her own addressing them by name with a certain gesture. Applejack crossed her right foreleg in front of her left and smiled broadly. Rainbow Dash flapped up into the air and kicked the air with her forehoofs. Fluttershy hid her face behind her mane and withdrew sharply. Rarity raised a forehoof and bowed her head with half-lidded eyes, and Piggy propped into place with a gay smile that showed all her teeth. And this is my surrogate son, Spike the Dragon. Twilight took the mulberry drake in her foreleg and nuzzled him against her cheek. He gave a soft but nervous smile at his surrogate mother's affection. By Twilight's own internal admission, it was not the best image they could have forth at their first meeting with another species. Each of the 6 mares had already seen better days, with their matted coats, tangled manes, and tails. The lot of them each had scrapes and bruises that they would remember long after this crisis would be resolved. Applejack's hairbands had long since been lost, leaving her blonde mane and tail to flow freely. Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy's feathers, along with those of Pinkie Pie's shoulders and fetlocks, were ill cared for and desperately in need of preening. Rarity was almost unrecognizable as the gorgeous alabaster unicorn mare of Carousel Couture. Her mane was frazzled and had long since lost its sleek sheen. Her coat was stained with sand and dirt, and her amethyst stubble was brightly showing around her muzzle. Twilight could only assume the same was true of herself, but she was never as fastidious as Rarity seemed about shaving her facial hair. In such situations where appearing unshaven would reflect badly on the Queen. Still, there was more to a first impression than appearances, and Twilight knew that from personal experience. Dozens of upper-crust of Canterlot, least of all Moondancer, had attempted to court her to the sides so as to merely kiss up to the Queen Celestia and to prove their already extravagant social standings. It was nothing to do with genuinely wanting to know her in any way, but what benefits could be received from becoming close to her. There were some who had seemed genuinely kind to her, but time revealed their true intentions. A slip of the tongue here, or a misremembering of details of Twilight's life there, and it became entirely too apparent what motivation there was in approaching Queen Celestia's pupil. But still, that was in the past. What disillusionment she faced was then left behind on that doorstep of her ivory tower back in Canterlot. Now she stood firm with 5 ponies, whom she could trust with her life, and could trust their lives with her. Taking all this to heart, Twilight took a deep breath and continued. I don't think I need to tell you what has befallen the world outside this forest and your heart hind, but Queen Celestia has tasked me to gather a band of ponies together so we might use the elements of harmony to overthrow Nightmare Moon. A raspy throat cleared from behind the herd of deer, and it parted to allow a small group to approach. It was the 5 elder deer who caught Twilight's eye earlier. These had to be the village elders referred to by Cobenut. The doe at the head of the small herd casually put the hoof at Cobenut.
Ahem. Cobenut, allow me a word with Fuzzhead and these pony delegates.
Yes, Madam Rosemary.
He replied with a bow of his head, retreating to the deer herd. Madame Rosemary turned her deep brown eyes upon Twilight. They were strong and piercing, showing a strength belittling her frail form.
You speak well, Twilight Sparkle,
she said slowly, revealing worn teeth that showed her long age.
But it is not very common for ponies to enter Hard Hind, and are not permitted to stay long at the best of times. As you can see, our village has fallen hard under the cold night of the harsh mistress of the moon. Our fathers must eat, so food and drink are given to them first. Those cannot bear young with such lacking food, and our stag lose their antlers prematurely under this wintry chill, making it only harder to ward predators away from our settlement. You have to realize that we cannot afford to bring in quart and 3 more mouths to feed when our lives are already under such strain.
The crowd of deer behind the elder doe began to rustle in irritation, some voices rising up in protest of Madame Rosemary's decision.
Come on, Madame Rosemary,
cried a high voice from behind the herd. It must have been a short stag indeed, for not even antlers could be seen from where his voice was.
They're fixed to save the world. You can't turn them back now.
One of the other does, amongst the village elders, turned to face the other village. Hold your tongue, butter and eggs, while Madame Rosemary is speaking.
I thank you, Madam Ember,
replied Madame Rosemary curtly.
Now, I know it is a difficult choice to make, but it's my duty as the chief village elder to make difficult choices.
Fuzzhead's eyebrows furrowed as he slowly trotted toward the elderly doe, taking careful steps on his splint as he did so. Madame Rosemary eyed it curiously, before looking the relatively younger stag in the eye. Fuzzhead began. With all due respect, Madame, I do not see the necessity of this difficult choice of yours. These ponies have come a long way, or so it seems, and I am willing to vouch for them if I must. Madame Rosemary met Fuzzhead's eyes with disdain and disapproval.
Always that you feel your word counts for more than others, Fuzzhead. Despite your stately name, I have no reason to accept your word on the matter. For almost all your square and 1/4 years, you have been so quick to reckon yourself right, and every deer else wrong. You have no friends in this village, no deer to confound me. And the only place you could find in a Hard Hind was on the outskirts as a scout. And now you show that you think it is wise to accept strangers into the village during such troubled times.
What the hey? Interjected Rainbow Dash. We come all this way just for you to turn us down? What kind of horse apples place is this?
I will not suffer your indignance, pony,
snapped Rosemary, before returning her flashing eyes to Fuzzhead.
Were I not mistaken, I would think you to be overly attached to these outsiders for having just met them.
She glanced down at Fuzzhead's splintered leg.
Did they do this to you?
Fuzzhead hesitantly lifted his injured hind leg for every deer to see. Eyes sparkled at the cobalt brace which supported his weight. They did indeed. The edges of the forest have proven deserted these past weeks, owing to the persistent frost and snow. But I maintained my vigil on the off chance. Then, earlier today, I saw a light. Now, lights just don't pop in and out of nowhere, I thought. And I approached, seeing this band, apart from Twilight Sparkle.
I was checking that my heliosensing sun around Ponyville had not gone out.
Twilight cut in.
Don't interrupt a deer in his speech!
Barked one of the elder stags. Twilight recoiled with flattened ears as if struck.
Thank you, Sir Buds.
Droned Madame Rosemary.
Continue, Fuzzhead.
Well, madam, I had grown anxious, you see. All this nightmare eternal nonsense, with my antlers shedding and no proper outlet for my troubles. So, I got a bit overzealous in my resolve to drive them away, and... He looked back ruefully at his hind leg. But the Pegasus over there, Fluttershy. He motioned toward her with his antlers, and the Pegasus blushed pink, and wrapped her mane around her face in alarm. She tended to me despite my hostilities and my pride. She showed me that kindness should be shown even towards the most bitter foe. I do not know how I can atone for my hubris before you and Hearthind, but I do not ask you for much. I ask for one day, maybe two, that these quart and two ponies and their drake be sheltered in this village. It can be my own hut, but it will be no burden. It is all that I ask of you, village elders, to lend me this one last favor. One, and I shall not pursue myself greater than any deer else ever again. He inclined his head low, and a sudden stillness and quiet fell over the village. Not even a fawn cried out. The village deers looked back and forth at each other questioningly. They never heard the Fuzzhead speak so courtly before. Was presented his request as seeming all the more reasonable.
You speak highly, Fuzzhead. It is as if one of the Side Kings of old. Be as it may,
replied Rosemary sternly.
My decision is final. Your pony companions must find someone else to...
The crowd parted once more, but not to omit further village elders, but a pony, a young earth pony stallion. He had a butter-yellow coat paler than Fluttershy's, a curly cotton-white mane that stuck out in every direction, and a cutie mark of an egg sunny side up. He was surprisingly wiry for an earth pony stallion, and had a pair of branches tied to the top of his head in the imitation of stag's antlers. His bright blue eyes were currently trained upon Madame Rosemary in indignation.
Madame Rosemary, you can't just kick him out. Look at him. He's been through around your nose one. If we're going to turn him away, that just ain't right.
Come, that made for the pony.
Butter and eggs, please, don't get yourself involved. Butter's right,
cried out a stag in their herd.
That Twilight Sparkle says he's looking to save the world. Why can't we help them if we can't?
It can't be for more than a few days, can it?
Reasoned the doe.
Come now, my little dear,
snapped Rosemary.
Listen to yourselves. You're sounding like a bunch of spoiled fawns.
And if you don't mind me saying, spoke the third elder doe, almost hissing in Rosemary's ear,
you're sounding like a crusty old hind. Oleander!
gasped Rosemary indignantly.
Look at these dear, Rosemary,
smiled Oleander, her emerald green eyes traveling over the deer in the village center.
Look at the hope running in their eyes. They can see the light awaiting them at the end of the tunnel, the light of a new dawn over us. Would you want to see the doe who snuffs out that light? And look!
She gestured towards a heliosensing sun hovering at Twilight Sparkle's side.
That purple unicorn has her own miniature sun with her. I feel the springtime has been weakening, and its deterioration will only accelerate. I foresee that our resistance to the encroaching night will not last another week. Would you really want to turn that miniature sun away from our people?
Twilight watched warily as Madame Rosemary looked back and forth from the herd of milling stags, does, and fawns to Twilight and her band, while another elder, evidently named Madame Oleander, attempted to persuade her colleague to see reason. It was nice to know that they had one ally amongst the village elders at least. From what Twilight Sparkle had seen so far, it seemed as though this was a highly traditional village. butter and eggs notwithstanding, must place more value on the decisions of its elders than that on the voice of its people. Even if the bulk of Heartline's dear folk thought it preferable to let them stay, there would still be the issue of the village elders putting their hose down and preventing such.
I see no harm in letting them have to take refuge in Hind,
mused the other stag among the elders.
We'll serve Silverwood. That makes 2 amongst the elders in favor, Rosemary.
Oleander said with a hint of triumph.
Maybe this time of emergency is reason enough to bend our no outsiders rule.
What are you talking about, no outsiders? Rainbow Dash cut in, pulling at butter and eggs. That guy ain't from... Applejack snatched Rainbow by the foreleg, pulling her face to face. Keep your muscles shut! Applejack asked coarsely. I reckon that colt there thinks himself a deer, so you better not be saying anything that ruin his day. The perennial earth pony offered a nervous smile to the village elders, who were giving her a curious expression, as though they had a rather canny idea as to what her interruption was all about. After a tense moment, Madame Rosemary gestured toward Applejack and Rainbow Dash.
Appreciated, Lady Applejack. Now, please see it to you that your Pegasus friend holds her tongue, while we deliberate.
Rainbow Dash gave Applejack a mutinous look, but the earth pony pointed sharply at the ground and drew her foot across her mouth. Rainbow Dash lay roughly beside Fluttershy and crossed her forelegs barely. As it transpired, Madame Amber had become rather indecisive as to whether or not Twilight's band could take refuge in Hind. In her mind, neither option was preferable, and she would need time to make this decision. With the remaining 4 elders split up down the middle, they had reached an impasse on a decision that needed to be made promptly.
After all, we cannot make a decision here, or we may as well allow them asylum here in Heartland.
Rosemary explained to her fellow elders. She sighed.
We are at a stalemate. We may need to bite the arrowhead and ask the village there themselves to make the decision.
Almost immediately, Madame Oleander and Sir Silverwood faced the deer of Heartland.
All in favor of allowing the band of ponies to stay in our village, take a step forwards,
said Oleander. Butter and Eggs took a step forward, as did Cobalt to their astonishment, and Fuzzhead, who took a step forwards from his spot by Twilight's band. The branch-wearing earth pony was swiftly joined by over 3.5 dozen deer, more than half of the village. The stags, does, fawns looked about each other, first intrigued, then beaming. Oleander, who had herself stepped forward with Silverwood, faced Rosemary with a look of triumph on her face, and laid her side.
All in favor of sending the band on the way, take a step back,
grumbled Rosemary. Fewer than 24 deer stepped backwards from their centers. Many among them had taken on expressions of resignation. Rosemary did not even need to take a head count to know where the decision lay. She took in a deep breath and said,
It would seem that the eyes have it. Now, we know that these young ponies will be calling out our Hind home for the time being. We shall have them quartered.
Her brown eyes searched the faces of the deer for any sign of assent or acknowledgment, though she was admittedly bitter that her motion had not passed. Letting the pony stay would be the preferable path in the long run. All that Rosemary had to do was smile and nod, and strive to remind ponies of how she had gladly welcomed them into the Heartland. She still had a good long hike ahead of her, and fawns were impressionable. They could be persuaded that they merely misremembered her thoughts on the matter of the quart and 2 pony outsiders. Twilight's heart unclenched at the notion of having a place of relatively comfort to stay for the present. The desert leading up to Midzeal was, looking back, physically and emotionally draining. The idea that there were giraffes who were so hateful towards zebras that they would just skin them and wear their coats ate away at her inside, and filled her with empty terror. The world was full of great problems even without Nightmare Moon, though the Night Queen's presence definitely exacerbated many of them. Passing through the quantum mazes of the Minotaurs was a welcome reprieve, but the frosted chill of their arrival in Equestria renewed her feelings of dread of that inevitable confrontation with Nightmare Moon. The headless horse and her relentless pursuit tore away at Twilight's energy at every level, building upon the drains he felt coming out of the forest. Desert. Rest would be a blessing from the Maker himself. A doe with a pale coat stepped up next to Cobnut.
Hurry, darling. Perhaps we should allow Twilight Sparkle in her company house room. We can allow space in the living room, can't we?
Cobnut gave the doe, evidently his wife, a curious look.
Strawberry dear, we already have a mouth to feed. And now you ask that we take on Quart and 3 more, not knowing how long they will stay?
Please, sir, Twilight implored. We don't mean to stay longer than a day or two. At the very least, we will need time to rest and gather our thoughts. We haven't had a decent rest in days, and there's much I need to discuss with my friends about a revelation I've had just before Fuzzhead brought us here.
Only a day or two?
Piped in Butter and Eggs, who apparently gunned up to Cobnut.
Please, Dad, can we take them in, please? I'll let them share my room.
Cobnut looked from Strawberry to the young stallion wearing branches, and let out a soft breath through his nostrils.
I suppose it would not be a terrible proposition.
He faced the fellow's elders.
Fellows elders, I, Cobnut, and my family accept the responsibility of quartering the pony outsiders and their drink within our home.
The 5 of them inclined their heads at the one-horned stag.
You do your dear folk a great service, Cobnut,
said Oleander contently.
Make sure they sleep well.
Cobnut nodded and turned to face Twilight and her company.
Come with me.
Twilight nodded.
Thank you, Mr. Cobnut, but I just need a moment.
With a flourish of her alicorn, Twilight set the heliosynthetic sun to hover over the bonfire in the middle of the town. Cobnut and his wife, Strawberry, along with their adopted son, the pony Butter and Eggs, led the band of ponies to their home, one of those in the circle around the bonfire, with a door flanked by 2 windows facing the village square. It stood 2 stories tall, a balcony at the top floor overlooking the bonfire and the recently placed heliocentric sun. The windows were dressed with snapdragons and strawberry flowers, providing a fragrance that gave a wholesome aura to the already homely home. Stepping across the threshold into Cobnut's home brought Twilight and her friends into a wide space that acted as a living room and kitchen all at once. Mats woven for cotton were placed in a circle in one half of the room, obviously arranged for any sort of company that the small family would keep. On the other hand was a brick oven and stove, with an icebox to its side. The drip pan was bordering on overflowing, and around the walls wound a ramp leading up to the top floor, along with hangers to place cloaks on. The 6 mares and Drake drew out those given to them by the labyrinthine minotaurs set upon the hooks.
So, where shall you sleep?
Cobnut asked curtly. Twilight looked intently on the ground floor of the Cobnut Strawberry household, pondering. Well, I think we can all rest here easily, down here in the living room. It wouldn't do to make any permanent arrangements for us, so we can rest here.
Fine by me,
Rainbow Dash said with a very loud and obvious yawn. I can sleep anywhere.
She really can,
Fluttershy whispered to Twilight.
All she has to do is close her eyes for 10 seconds, and she's out like a candle.
Twilight snickered lightly at Fluttershy's comment. Such openness was something that she, in retrospect, realized was uncommon for the Yellow Pegasus. She must have indeed thought of Twilight as a dear friend.
Very well,
Cobnut said, before casting a light look on Butter and Eggs that was very unusual to see on the one-horned stag's face.
Looks like they won't have to share your room after all, Butter.
The pony passing for a deer looked slightly output.
Would any of you like some dinner?
Offered Strawberry. Thank you kindly, ma'am, but I don't think we're all fixing for some rest. Applejack replied, looking about the group.
You said it,
yawned Spike.
I'm exhausted from riding on Mom's back all day.
Twilight snorted, leaving to Spike to get tired from laying around.
I could not agree more, Applejack,
added Verity.
A man needs a beauty rest, and Celestia knows I've been lacking it lately.
She stuttered, looking down at her hooves, worn and rough. In short time, the band of ponies had set their saddle sails outside, chosen their favorite mats in the living room, and either laying down upon them, or in the cases of Applejack and Twilight, rotating their patillas so to stand upright while resting. No sooner did Twilight set her legs in position than she felt herself drifting into a dark, empty sleep. Twilight was roused from her oblivious rest by the sounds of an argument.
I'm telling you, AJ, he's going to find out eventually. We've got to let him know that he's not a deer. He's a pony.
Like, who's to say he wouldn't have found out by now?
Now, Butter Legs don't strike me as the brightest candle in the chandlery, but I reckon he have caught into something.
Well, maybe he hasn't. And it just ain't right that some pony who's a pony thinks he's some deer. He's got to learn the truth.
And I think it ain't none of your business, Rainbow Dash. If his folks think he's fit to know, he's fit to know. And I don't rightly see Coconut or Strawberry raring to tell him anytime soon.
All the more reason for some pony to tell him. I mean, it's so obvious he's not a deer. Did you see those antlers he strung on top of his head? He has to think something's up.
And what if he doesn't? Now, you'll be raising Tartarus for no reason.
It ain't for no reason. He thinks he's a deer for pony's sake.
So what's so world-ended about that? What if you thought you were a griffin or something? Would you want some pony to tell you that your entire life's been a lie?
Of course!
That wouldn't be cool to think that I was one of their reverie bird brains. Well, still, I don't think it's our place to be meddling in that kid's life. It should be his folks that want to decide if he is to know.
You already said that!
That don't mean it ain't important. Besides, Twilight, I didn't know you woke up. Twilight rubbed her eyes ruefully, ears flat. I just woke up. Do you girls realize how loud you argue? Rainbow Dash scratched the back of her head nervously.
Yeah, sorry about that. I tend to get loud when I'm arguing with some pony who just won't concede!
She finished with a slightly hostile tone. Applejack bared her teeth. Are you sure you ain't talking about yourself? 'Cause it sure looks like that way from where I'm standing.
What good could possibly come out of not letting that kid know who he really is? Girls!
Twilight shouted, her Alicorn glowing pink and her Twimmer shimmer glowing around the arguing Earth Pony and Pegasus and pulling them apart from one another.
With you yelling at each other like this, it's a wonder that this whole forest doesn't hear you. Hey, Butter and Egg probably hears you arguing like this from down here. Good! Rainbow Dash snapped. He needs to know!
Even if he did, not like this, replied Twilight. You really better hope that Butter and Eggs isn't up there, because if he is...
He ain't here, Twi, Applejack offered calmly. Coconut and his wife and kid went out to square to discuss something with the elders, and everybody else decided to take along. I didn't think it was right to leave you here alone, what with Spike taking along after Rarity and all.
Twilight gave a small sigh. That much was good, at least. Pulling her thoughts together, after a murky rest interrupted by a very impassioned argument, she looked back and forth between the burly, scarred Earth Pony and the lean, wiry Pegasus. Now, I agree with Applejack on the matter. We didn't come here to cause any identity crisis, and we're certainly not in any place to tell any deer, or any pony, what they are supposed to be. If Butter and Egg think himself as a deer, then he should be treated as a deer and respected as such. It's not like he's been brainwashed into being a deer, right? Applejack gave a grateful smile to Twilight as she lowered to the ground, while Rainbow Dash looked rather spiteful. Hard Hind's village square was less full than it had been on their arrival. Then again, it transpired that they had arrived relatively early in the morning of the village, and it was now a dozen hours later. Most deer were asleep at this moment, excepting Fuzzhead, Coconut, Strawberry, and Butter and Eggs, who had all taken to accompany Pinkie Pie, Fluttershy, Rarity, and Spike in a meeting with the village elders by delight in defeating a bonfire.
In light of this grand circumvention of protocol in Hind,
Madame Rosemary said lowly,
there will be further rationing of food and water for the duration of your stay here. What?
Spike cut in.
What? Why?
Because, little dragon,
added Silverwood,
our village has no contact outside this forest, so we must tend to our own sources of food, dwindling as they may be.
That's dreadful,
replied Fluttershy.
Indeed,
Professor Bert said. Under the lighter note, though, the sun summoned by your unicorn friend will do wonders in assuring our continued worth, and potentially restoring proper growing conditions for our crops. But we also need to ensure that we are doubly successful at catching all the snow melted by this, so we can improve our water quota as well.
Ah! Pinkie squealed.
bouncing up and down on her hose, which made high squeaks as he hit the ground.
I got lots and lots of candy and treats and sweets in my saddlebag. Bet you guys haven't had a tasty treat in a really, really long time.
Candy, echoed Madame Amber. We don't need sugary treats. We need proper gains.
Ah, but I got cupcakes, chocolate chip cookies, pralines, sugar cookies, bonbons, chocolate cookies, eclairs, lemon cookies, lollipops, oat cookies, sour donuts, sweet cookies, jawbreakers, vanilla cookies, and churros,
asked Butter and Eggs quietly.
I was just getting to those, giggled Piggy excitedly. I can't just wait to share them all with you.
Faster than blinking, the pink earth pony zipped right back to Coba's home, leaving a negative afterimage in the eyes of everyone staring at her. The villagers gave a look of mild alarm to Pinky's companions.
You'll get used to it,
Rarity explained. Or not, 'cause it's fun to be surprised.
I'm dragging after my own heart,
bellowed Pinkie Pie, trotting back with a veritable tower of all manner of sugary sweets and treats balanced on top of her head. The pale plate of pink cupcakes on top, barely below the lowest of the tree branches over heart line. Flicking her head back sharply, the tower of plates and baked goods and treats soared up into the air, and the village elders all cried out in alarm, before landing perfectly in a circle around a bundled pile of singed twigs and branches. Nice job, Pinky. Ice blinked in befuddlement. Do your saddlebags really hold such large quantities of luggage? Asked Fudhead. Is this normal for you ponies? More like normal for Pinkie Pie, Spike responded. She does have all sorts of weird, amazing stuff that other ponies can't. Rarity slid her over Spike's mouth, smiling nervously at the village elders, and offering a similar nervous chuckle.
I'm afraid we needn't be regaled by tales of Pinkie Pie frequently breaking many rules, and dare say some laws in the process. In any case, these are several wares from Pinkie Pie's employers, as you can keep corner.
The village elders craned their necks down at the sugar-laden traits, eyeing them with fascinating.
Such bright colors,
mused Madame Oleander. I have never seen food that looks such as this, said Silverwood.
These muffins with sugar coating,
asked Madame Amber.
We ponies call cupcakes. Come on and try them,
beamed Pinkie Pie, offering an eager smile to the village elders.
I would rather not,
responded Rosemary, literally turning her nose up at them.
It is unbecoming of a village elder to lower herself to eating such Madame.
The addressed village elder had bent down to more fully taken, and taken a chocolate chip cookie in her mouth, eating it with every indication of satisfaction. Her four fellow elders watched her tremulously, almost as though they feared the cookie to be poisonous. After swallowing the cookie, Oleander's face wrinkled and split in a smile.
It is delicious. I have not tasted something so strongly sweet in decades.
Madame Amber cast her eyes down on the sweets herself, now wearing a curious expression. Tentatively, she took a cider donut in her mouth and cider donut. I took a small bite from it. She chewed, her eyes widened, and with a smile took the rest of the donut into her mouth, eating it with relish. As Pinkie Pie's smile broadened, the remaining three elders took up some of the pastries of their own and ate them with various degrees of enjoyment. Madame Rosemary seemed to be rather resistant to the idea of enjoying her eclair, but Sirs Burns and Silverwood smiled at one another as they ate their respective churro and praline. I think our little dear could use these to lift their spirits, suggested Oleander brightly. Three of the others nodded deeply. Rosemary sighed.
A quarter one.
Amber faced Pinkie Pie.
You do have more, don't you?
Pinkie nodded smilingly.
Of course! You don't think I bring down all of my sweets, do you? I've got plenty more stats away for pastry emergencies.
Of course you do. Rarity chuckled dazedly.
Perhaps we should go back with her. Make sure there's no swords become daybreak. Physically speaking, of course.
Very well, Conut replied, turning to face the elders with a light smile. It seems our food rations may yet be postponed.
That remains to be seen,
replied Most very cryptically. The trio of ponies, the drake, and family of deer, and their pony's son, made their way away from the elders. Fuzzhead took a step after them. May I stop in myself? The departing group turned toward Fuzzhead, Combnut, and Strawberry in mild shock. The ponies in spite of curiosity, and Butter and Eggs in excitement.
Really? You want to come over, Mr. Fuzzhead?
He said eagerly.
Please say it. Can you come over? Please, 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 please.
Combnut looked down at his son amusedly. This is just to feel the fuzz on his head, isn't it?
Yes,
Replied Butter and Eggs happily and seamlessly, prompting snorts of laughter from those around him.
at least your son is honest, Mr. Combnut.
Verity offered. Combnut studied in amusement before beckoning towards Fuzzhead. Come along, son, Combnut said soberly. You're welcome to whatever pastries Miss Pinkie Pie pulls out thin air next. Rainbow Dash was still refusing to speak to Twilight and Applejack when the door opened to admit the remainder of the party, along with the family offering them space and... Fuzzhead?
Mr. Fuzzhead?
Twilight wondered aloud.
I didn't know that Combnut would let you in the house. I thought he didn't like you.
I didn't,
answered Combnut with a wry smile. But my son wanted to play with Fuzzhead's head fuzz, so I let him in. Rainbow Dash waved airily. Way to go, little colt! Applejack's eyes flashed at the cerulean Pegasus, but Butter and Eggs blinked in confusion.
Colt? I'm not a colt. I'm a fawn. It's what I am.
No, son, you're not a fawn,
Combnut said lowly, leaning down to meet his son eye to eye. A pregnant pause filled the house, tense and leaving no room for air. Then, Combnut bumped his nose against Butter's.
You're a big, strong stag, just like your old man.
Dull. Butter and Egg split his face in a wide grin, pawing at the ground and lowering his head to charge his dad.
You bet I am, Dad.
He smacked his head against one of his dad's legs. Francis tied to his head, bouncing ineffectively off. Combnut, for his part, faked a cry of agony and fell bodily to the floor.
Last, you slain me, great warrior!
He groaned in fake pain. Butter's ears flattened, but cracking a smile betrayed his amusement.
Dad, stop it!
Everything's going dark.
Dad!
Remember who you are.
That's like the second Lion King reference in this whole entire fanfic. This fanfic is good to me. It loves me. And I love it. Combnut's head went limp, his eyes gazing unfocused up at the ceiling. Butter and Eggs hung his head, standing over his dad. Then began to run his hooves vigorously over Combnut's midsection. The stag's hind legs began to twitch, then his forelegs, then his lips quirked into a smile. And before anyone knew it, Combnut was rolling about on the floor, laughing with all the mirth in the world, with his son relentlessly tickling his belly. Finally, he rolled his butt onto his belly and cut Butter and Eggs between his forelegs.
Well, well, it seems that the tickle doctor's worked his magic again.
Butter and Eggs nodded quickly, and Combnut beamed. Well, Twilight said abruptly, now that every pony's here, perhaps we could discuss what came to mind before we arrived here in Heartland? Her friends all offered statements in the affirmative, though Rainbow Dash seemed to be rather unenthusiastic. The small herd of deer stood beside cautiously.
You don't mind if we listen to you?
Asked Strawberry. Of course not, replied Twilight. You offered us house room, and it's not like our goal is a very big secret.
Secret?
Butter and Eggs asked, his curiosity piqued.
What's a secret? Can I keep a secret?
Well, Butter, Twilight began, you all know how it's gotten all dark and cold the past few weeks. The yellow kid nodded. Well, it's because of a big evil mare that has taken over Equestria and taken the Queen of Light captive. I'm the Queen of Light's student, and I was given the task of bringing back the elements of harmony, the only force capable of defeating the evil mare, Nightmare Moon. Butter shivered.
The Nightmare Moon? The Dark Mare? But I thought she was just a spooky story.
Oh, we all thought she was, Eggie,
said Fuzzhead. Several pairs of eyes focused on the young stag, who shrugged his shoulders.
It just came to me.
The nickname. It's not bad, is it?
No, not really, replied Combnut, but it's just that I never heard of it before. There's a lot of things that none of us have heard before we set off on this quest, commented Applejack. Heal the Genesis spell, Crystal Mountain Caves, Sarah Melon, Gruslung. The list just keeps on growing. You're telling me I could give you a list of all the things I didn't know before reading this fic.
Well, hopefully, if my hypothesis is correct, Twilight interjected, we won't need to hear many more of these new things. I think I figured out the trick behind reactivating each of the elements of harmony, and which element each of us most likely carries.
And how does it work, Twilight?
Asked Fluttershy. Twilight faced her alabaster unicorn friend. Rarity, do you remember when you gave up your razor at Canterlot?
As if it happened yesterday,
recalled Rarity. It was a noble sacrifice of a noble instrument, but I do not regret it in the slightest. Your need was greater than mine, Twilight, and I stand firmly by that. And that, Twilight smirked, is the trick. From the moment I met you, you were always so generous, using your own materials to craft new dresses for me as inspiration struck you, disregarding any notion of repayment. Verity, I think you are the element of generosity! Her eyes widening in wonder, Verity's periwinkle drummer shimmer lit up her shadow cell, the lights unlocking, and the glowing purple shards of her element flowing out to her seemingly own curd. They hovered around her head as if a halo. She looked at them.
The element of generosity.
The shards flashed brightly at Rarity's words. Would seem to Twilight be affirmation enough. So far, so good. Pinkie Pie?
Yes, Twilight!
Replied the pink earth pony, with batting eyelids. Remember at the library in Ponyville, just before we left for the Crystal Mountains? I found out then just how much you really love to make ponies smile and laugh. You throw parties for new ponies in town, and make sure that their first impression is a joyful one. You bake the most delicious pastries I've ever tasted, and you don't even ask for a single bit's payment. You want to be friends with as many ponies as you can, so that way you can make as many ponies as possible happy. I don't doubt in the slightest that you, Pickamina Diane Pie, bear the element of laughter. Piggy's shadow cell, gliding open on the floor, streamers and party poppers strewn about, began to emit a blue light from within. Shards of rock, Piggy's element, levitated themselves out and floated around Piggy's head, just like Rarity. Piggy giggled.
I really do love laughter!
The element's shards flashed brightly. Applejack, remember down in Equestria when you learned that Nightmare Guard had set up in the garrison of Ponyville? How did that make you feel? Like my blood was running as high as the sun, Applejack seethed. All I wanted to do was march back home and learn a thing or two about messing with the apples. Taking a deep breath, Applejack smiled at Twilight. But I knew that I wouldn't be doing the world any favors by throwing in the towel. But I did give you the choice, Applejack. No pony would have blamed you if you went back. I would have. I wouldn't have been able to sleep knowing that I cut and run on you all when you needed another helping hoof. I'm loyal to my family like no pony's business, but loyalty ain't just about standing beside some pony, is it? At least, not in the literal sense. It's also about standing up for a cause. Standing up for some pony, even if that pony's dozens of grosses of miles away. If you understand what I'm saying. Emerald eyes wide in realization. Twilight? Are you saying that I... Twilight smiled. I am, Applejack. I'm saying that you bear the element of loyalty! Applejack's shadow cell began to quaver as in protest. And Twilight quickly flipped it open with her magic. The shards of Applejack's element hovered up to the Ponyville Earth Pony, illuminating the scars and freckles on her face as they hovered around, glowing in a bright apple red. Apples! Loyal to the core! At Applejack's proclamation, the shards flashed even more brightly. Twilight was elated. She had not felt such joy since Queen Celestia threw to her thesis on Star-Swirl the Beard's Evermorphic spell, and further studies on how it should affect future gauntlet craft. This was progressing swimmingly. She already had strong ideas about who bore the last two elements they had on hoof. Fluttershy, Twilight continued, this takes us to the present. When we entered this forest, I generated a fake sun to ward off the headless horse. Butter Eyes squealed in alarm.
But, like, the Haley's...
He threw his hose up to his muzzle in shock. Pupils constricted. Twilight's heart jumped. She had almost forgotten they had a younger audience member. While Spike was about this cult, this fawn's age, Spike had a first claw encounter with the headless horse. Taking a deep breath, Twilight continued. Anyway, this fake sun did its job, but I was scared that the one in Ponyville was compromised. I went out there to check on it, and waited right back here after seeing it was indeed still in order. But when I arrived, I found in the small time it had been away, you had all been charged by Fuzzhead here. 3 pairs of eyes swiveled over to Fuzzhead, who looked ruefully down at his splint. And even though Fuzzhead here insisted that he did not deserve such kindness, you mended his injury and helped him get back to here to Hind.
Well...
Fluttershy smiled nervously, her ears going limp against her head.
I really couldn't just leave him there.
And that is part of what makes you such a good pony, Fluttershy. You are kind even to others who don't seem to deserve it. Remember the Chimericals in the Everfree? You weren't frightened of them, or hostile toward them. You just kindly asked if they could let us pass. Now, at the time, I thought that you were pathetically meek. But now I see. You're not a weak pony at all, Fluttershy. You saved us all from that hemoglobin with that stare of yours. I have no doubt that you bear the element of kindness. Before she even finished speaking, Twilight had already unlatched Fluttershy's saddle sail, allowing the glowing green shards of her element to hover about and over to Fluttershy. She withdrew slightly in fright at the rocks floating toward her, but relented at the calming feel she got upon looking at the levitating pieces of her element. Fluttershy smiled.
I just feel so much kindness right now.
The element flashed bright green, with red, green, blue, and purple lights dancing about in the atmosphere of serenity settled upon the ponies, the drake, and deer in the room. The elements of harmony were coming back together. 4 for 4. There was only one pony. Well, 2 really. Rainbow Dash, Twilight began, but the cerulean Pegasus interrupted her. I know! You're going to tell me that I'm the element of honesty or something like that. But how can I be the element of honesty if I can't even be honest? The element of bluntness is more accurate, murmured Applejack. First off, none of us are the elements of harmony, but the bearers of the elements, replied Twilight crossly. And secondly, I don't like what you're implying. You've been far more upfront with the truth than any pony else this entire journey. And you're complaining now that no pony's letting you speak your mind?
Aww, don't be so grumpy, Dashy Lassie,
cooed Pinkie Pie.
Here, I'll let you fire one of my special potty poppers. Just remember to cover your ears.
Maybe I won't be grumpy when I'm free to say what I want. I mean, I can't fly where I want, when I want, as fast as I want. Now I'm being told I can't talk how I want. I swear I'm going to climb the walls! Twilight was astonished at the change that unfolded in Rainbow Dash. Before they arrived at Heartline, she still had her brass streak going strong. Now, she was accusatory and antsy, all because some pony else did not want to break the happy world that a cult lived in as a fawn. Rainbow Dash. Twilight reached out imploringly. You have to understand there's a time and place for telling the truth. I'm not saying you should never tell the truth. I'm just suggesting that we put the truth on hold for a little while. At least in this case. We can come back to this village later and... Oh, please. Just know it's not really our place to say.
Say what? Nothing, darling,
answered Strawberry, nuzzling the top of her son's head.
It's nothing, really.
Rainbow Dash looked like she wanted to throw something, but gritted her teeth and instead settled on a look like she really had to relieve herself. Fine! Do things your way, T.S. The remainder of the day was spent in Fort Splendidness. Though the elements of harmony which were active helped fill the home with an air of wholesomeness that made one feel joyously optimistic, there was an air of tension about the festivities that mostly hung around Rainbow Dash. Fluttershy did her best to boost Rainbow Dash's mood, though she did get the smile on the cerulean Pegasus. It was all too clear she was just putting it on for her fiancé's sake. Even Pinkie Pie's cupcakes did little to affect Rainbow Dash's mood, which put Pinkie in something of a funk. Surprisingly, though, it was butter and eggs that helped bring Rainbow Dash back to some semblance of normalcy. It was all too apparent that, cult or fawn, He was a perfect little gentle coat, or rather, gentle stag. He was kindly offered to Rainbow Dash whatever pastry had caught her eye. He scampered to and fro to refill glasses of water and pink lemonade. And he always said please and thank you whenever it was appropriate.
You really raised an awesome son here, guys,
she said brightly to Cold-Blooded Strawberry. The dear parent smiled in return. Well, he does take after his mother, replied Coconut.
Oh, you.
Strawberry chuckled, resting her head against her husband's. And of course, Butter and Eggs got to mess with Fuzzhead's head fuzz, just as his dad had promised him. Finally turning in for the night, Butter and Eggs said good night, one by one, to each and every one of his parents' house guests. He shared a hoof and claw bump with Spike, and accepted a good night hug from Fluttershy, before he and his parents doused the oil lamps, closed the curtains, and went upstairs. Deciding to settle down to the floor this time, and wrap herself in a blanket tonight, Twilight found herself being pissed at. The culprit was Rainbow Dash. So, she did not look as sour as she had after the elements had been identified for her other friends. She definitely looked more pensive than Twilight had ever seen on the honest Pegasus.
You really think lying to him is the answer?
Asked Rainbow Dash in a soft hiss. Twilight hesitated.
No, but when you put it like that, but he's happy, isn't he? You've seen it. Would you really want to ruin it?
Now it was Rainbow Dash's turn to falter.
Well, honestly, no. But he's got to find out some point. Do you think he'll feel better if everyone around him just lets him find out or he gets clued in?
Twilight had no answer.
Let's talk about this later, okay?
She responded, before settling down in what to become a very fitful sleep.